Hi, my name is Harris. I'm one of your podcast hosts. I'm also a lawyer at Treadstone Law. For most Canadians, buying, selling, or refinancing real estate, a lawyer is the last thing on their mind. That's unfortunate because lawyers play a vital role in the process. But what choices do Canadians have? Lawyers can be very expensive. Well, Treadstone Law offers resources to Canadians so they have access to the information they need. Whether you sign up for a live workshop or a mailing list, we cover topics to help you make informed decisions and avoid costly mistakes. It's advice you can start using today, and best of all, it's free. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click the link below to get access right now. If you're looking to retain Treadstone Law, it's never been easier. Our entire process is online. From completing the retainer agreement to your signing appointment, everything is done from the comfort of your own home. We're your digital lawyers. The best part of it is that you don't pay anything when you're retaining our firm. Visit treadstonelaw.ca/MAS offer or click on the link below to retain us right now. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Hustle and Grit. Today on my podcast, I have Jacob Harvie. It is Jacob's continued privilege to help people through one of their most important decisions in life, home buying, whether it's first-time home buyers to people relocating in a new house to investors. Jacob works hard to ensure his clients' needs are met promptly and with the professional execution that has been expected of him and in his business. As a mortgage broker, Jacob wants to expand all options he has for his clients and work to solve their financing needs in the best possible manner under the most sensible fiscal solution for their situation. Welcome to the podcast, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, Harris. I appreciate you taking the time. That's a great intro. Thank you.
It's the best, you know. So I had to use it. So, I've had the pleasure working with you throughout the years. It's truly been it's always a pleasure to work with strong professionals, and I'm really happy to have you on the podcast to kind of pick your brain, if I may, on what's to come, or what to expect in the market. But to kick things off, I just want to kind of jump into how you got into the profession. Was mortgage brokering something that you felt like, growing up, that's what I'm going to do? Was it something that you fell into? Can you give our listeners a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, that's a big question. Was it my intention to find myself in this type of a career when I was younger? Not really. No, I did enjoy finance when I was younger, accounting, things like that, but I was more so, believe it or not, an athletic guy. And my first fare in the world was golf professional. So I did golf professional when I was much, much younger. I did my schooling in business. And when I was working as a golf professional, I was recruited into RBC. So I worked at RBC with my background from business. And they put you through a very, very rigorous training program, and it's a terrific place to work. There's no question. I spent just fairly close to a decade with RBC. I worked there as a financial advisor predominantly. My last 3 years there, I migrated into the mortgage specialist role, and I really enjoyed it. It was, a chance for you to work directly with your clients rather than handing them off when you were a financial advisor kind of thing. So after 3 years working there, no disrespect to RBC whatsoever, I enjoyed my time there. I just I opted to make a move to the brokerage world simply because a lot of the top tier banks, they have a specific clientele that they want to have, clients that meet specific criteria. So we all know that not everybody can necessarily meet that criteria. So I was seeing, the odd client that would walk out the door disappointed because you wouldn't necessarily be able to accommodate them directly at RBC, and we would refer them to a brokerage. So when I started seeing a lot of that with things changing in the economics of the world, et cetera, I chose to make the switch to the brokerage world, and currently working with the guys over at Pill Rock Mortgages and Mortgage Center, and they are part of the Dominion lending realm. So it's been a terrific place to work. It's been a terrific place to learn. Our brokerage itself has an awful lot of brokers that have a vast amount of knowledge. So if you need to work with brokers to work on a specific deal, then you have those tools available for you. So my history is a little bit different about coming to this type of a career, but I enjoy it. I really, really enjoy it. My partners are all terrific, and we work closely with any clients that are looking, and it doesn't have to be something where a client is looking to purchase right away. We would much prefer to have clients come to us the minute they kind of start thinking about buying a home, because there's a lot of questions to answer. For the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process, but if they have an issue that arises, whether it's a credit issue or an income issue or something like that, it's best to start early in case we have to resolve something for their approval.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and I want to back up a little bit just from what you said earlier. Like one of the things that you said, where RBC has kind of a set clientele, and moving over to the brokerage end of it, the mortgage broker side, you've got a lot more options, and that's one of the predominant reasons why I kind of advise anybody who's coming to me and asking, hey, should I be going to the bank or mortgage broker? If anybody comes and asks me, I will tell them it is mortgage broker, no doubt, just because banks are great. Again, like you said, I mean, we work with banks all day, and ultimately your lender is going to be a bank. But when you go into a brick and mortar kind of place, RBC has a fixed clientele, and they have limited products. So it's like, if they've only got a shoe size 10 and you need like a 9 or whatever it is, or you need an 11, they're going to put you in whatever size you can fit in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that size is the right size for you.
Correct. Yeah.
So
and sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was going to say that to that effect, I feel like the other part of it is also, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're really successful at a bank providing mortgages, I feel like 5 years down the line, when I come up for a renewal or something like that, you're probably going to get promoted. Whereas with a mortgage broker, I feel like the exact opposite is true. If you're really good, you're going to be around. So you actually build a lifelong relationship with the person handling your finances, as opposed to a logo that you're kind of meeting different people. Would that be safe to say?
That's a terrific analogy. Yeah, essentially what. And I can't speak for all mortgage specialists at RBC. There's a lot of terrific mortgage specialists at RBC, and they're on a career path that they would basically prefer to stay in the commission realm, and they don't necessarily want to be promoted. But you're absolutely right. There are situations, and that was my situation as a financial advisor at RBC. You will get moved around, especially when you're new to the job, to fill in certain roles. And the biggest complaint that I would always hear from people was, man, it sucks. You just got to this branch, and we've been working with you for 2 years, and now you're moving on. Like, can I still contact you? It's like, absolutely. My number hasn't changed, so you can contact me anytime. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I can handle the specific needs. Whereas you're right, as a brokerage, that was, when you move into the broker world, that was one of the things that I was considering, and took a long time to consider, is this a career path that I want to go on? Knowing full well that it was a bigger commitment. You lose the security of having a big corporation behind you, but it opens up more doors, because anybody that wants to inquire about buying a home or buying a rental or what have you can reach out to me, and we can, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, we can find a solution for them. Whereas sometimes when you're relegated to just one lender, you have limited options, and that's in all fairness, that's fine. I mean, banks are banks; they're going to have their own policies, but there's always an opportunity out there for a client in the brokerage world because there are just that many lenders out there. So that's been one of the things that I've enjoyed. So
I mean, but to that, I mean, I feel like for me personally, if I'm starting to buy my first house, and throughout life, I'm going to buy my first house. Maybe I want to buy an investment property. Maybe I want to buy a cottage. Maybe I need a credit line. There could be several different credit facilities
Yep.
that I will need over time. Sticking with one bank, I feel like it's not optimal because they may be really good at that first mortgage. They may not be really good with the credit lines. They may be really good with the credit lines, but they may not be really good at the investor side or the cottage or the second home or whatever
Right.
it is, right?
Yeah.
And so going to a mortgage broker, you could actually place them in different, knowing my life, you'd be able to place me and give me the best products depending on what I'm looking for. And so if I'm looking for a investment property, you could easily say, hey, listen, you know what? Like, it's great that you're in like looking for a property and you're with a big bank, whatever it may be, RBC, TD, Scotia. But you know what? Here's another bank that may be better suited for you to get into the investment because they're going to be able to give you more leverage, lower interest rate, better options, whatever it may be. It's just better suited for me.
Correct, and you're 100% accurate with that. And getting back to your original point, yes, the whole idea behind a broker is we want to wrap our arms around you for long term. We want to assist you, not just set you up into a mortgage and then have a nice day, and move on to the next one type thing. No. My whole objective, and that's usually, a lot of the things that I speak to with my realtors, is it is a long-term relationship. We hope anyway. If there's a good relationship built with the client, I'm going to take care of them for years to come. So, I want clients to reach out. I don't want clients to have apprehensions about asking questions about, anything to do with their purchase process or what they're going through with their renewal. It's a phone call, click, text, email away. We would rather have that type of contact in a relationship as opposed to, like you say, potentially not necessarily getting the advice you want long term because said person has moved from being a mortgage broker to a manager or something. And it's not to say that they can't necessarily serve you, but when you get that, you call that person and they deflect you to someone else that you don't know, then it's different. The relationship's not the same. You're just referring me to someone that I don't necessarily know. Whereas if, I work with a first-time home buyer couple, my goal is to help them for years to come. So yeah, that's been one of the benefits for sure.
And I also feel, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like with brokers, you have you can reach out to them much earlier on than you can do with banks. I feel like with banks, whether you're buying a house, investment property, whatever it may be, even like refis, they're not serious until like you put in an offer or you're ready to like refinance tomorrow. They're not going to look at it in any kind of serious way. They might put it in a calculator or you could put it on a calculator and it's going to give you a hypothetical number, but a dollar's not a dollar, and you know that better than I do in terms of income. And so it's completely different when you actually have to get approved. Whereas I feel like if I come to you, right, you're going to know exactly, okay, this is how much I'm making, and these are the banks that are going to take this kind of income. These won't. These will treat it this way or that way. And I can speak to you 6 months, a year before I'm actually going to buy so that I can start preparing myself for the purchase.
Absolutely. And the one benefit that we have, and this is obviously access for everybody for that matter, but the one thing that we do focus on is what is going to be going on with the economy and all things being equal over the next few years. So if you're coming up for renewal, especially a lot of the people that are panicking because they're in a low rate right now and they haven't renewed into the new higher rate situation yet. A lot of people are worried over the next 12 to 24 months of what that's going to look like. We can answer those questions now, so that way you can, take a look at your budget and say, yeah, you know what, hypothetically, if we get to this period, we can expect this much. And then if there is a need because they feel their budget is, too tight for whatever reason, then we would look at refinancing options and shop around to which lenders might make the best fit for them going forward. And that's something that I've tried to hit on with a lot of people via social media and just talking with them from past experiences or past clients, just to kind of say, look, I get it. We're going from the 2% realm to the borderline. Well, we are basically at 6%. So that's a significant increase from what they're used to. So the thing that I've, again, tried to reiterate is don't panic. Let's look at it now and see what the future holds, even if you're 2 years away, because it wouldn't make sense really, unless you absolutely had to get out of a low rate, to go into this rate situation now, unless you were in, a situation where you had to consolidate specific debt, you had the equity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even then, I would probably recommend most clients to seek out their current lender, and I would work with them to try and refinance it within so they can blend the rate. It just has to, like in the value proposition, it has to make fiscal sense for a client. I can't in good conscience put someone into something that it's not going to work out for them down the road, because the last thing I want to hear is them calling me in 4 or 5 years saying we're selling our house because we can't keep up with the mortgage payments. So that's what we work to avoid, because we want people to stay in their homes.
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of people, and while we're on this topic, I feel like this is something that without a doubt is on the minds of a lot of Canadians, and they're at one point, or they're kind of stressed about it. It's in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
But they're also trying to, not look at it, and hopefully it'll go away until like they get a notice in the mail that says, hey, you know what, your renewal's coming up, and this is what we're either, and maybe you can enlighten us what the options are for when you are renewing, because I feel like there may be cash payments that people have to make to bring their amortization back into what it's supposed to be. There may be higher bumps in payments. Those are the kind of issues. So if you could kind of go over a little bit about the type of issues that Canadians are facing, A, and then B, when can they actually, because I feel like people are waiting for the banks to send them something and then they have to face it. I want Canadians to be a bit more proactive. And this is why I would say, listen, if there's anyone who's listening and you have a renewal coming up, I would definitely reach out to Jacob. This is a plug. So wherever you're listening, depending on where you're listening from, Jacob's information is either on the side or below. I don't know where, but it depends on where you're listening. Reach out to him. But I would argue that they should reach out to you and ask what the options are. But then, how early should they be reaching out to understand their options, right? So firstly, if you could go over the type of news, I guess, good and bad, that Canadians are facing when they get the renewal, and then how early should they be reaching out to you so that they can have their renewal checked to make sure that they can plan for that renewal?
Yeah, great question. So, essentially where we're probably going over with this is, a lot of economists that I've listened to over the last 6 to 12 months, they're all sort of the same opinion. If it took us 4 to 5 years to get into this, it's going to take us 4 to 5 years to get out of it. So if you look at the timeline, and we've gone into this, we've been in the high rate situation for, upwards of 12 to 18 months kind of thing, where things have started to change. So if you were to equate that to that formula that they've suggested, we're probably looking at another at least 18 to 24 months before we start to see significant change on the rate side. So that means that anybody that's in a renewal situation with over the next 2 years, they can't avoid it. They're going to have to renew into either a shorter term, higher rate mortgage or what have you. And then that way they can, determine what's the best course of action for them. In terms of when I would ideally like to see a client or have them reach out, Every client that has a mortgage, whether it be with a monoline lender or one of the big five banks, they will have correspondence up the yazoo, and they will have access online. So my advice to clients is to just stay on top of it and know when your dates are. To your point about the fact that people sit on this, it's like doctor's appointments. How many people really want to be told I've got to go to a doctor to get a checkup? I'm just going to avoid it until it's the worst possible scenario. And we don't want that. So, I mean, this is finance. It's not health. It's a little bit easier in that respect. I typically 6 months out of their actual renewal date, because that way we can answer, a lot of things can happen in, say, the 3, 4, 5 years that those clients took those terms and those mortgages. They may have had bad credit. They may have had a child. They may have gotten married. They may have gotten divorced. There's all sorts of scenarios that can factor into what goes, into the next stages. Ideally, in a perfect world, if the client has no serious situations that have occurred and no employment is alterations, then sometimes a straight renewal with their existing lender is fine. But I think what we're going to start seeing is an awful lot of consolidation of debt, because during COVID, you didn't have to be a genius to sort of figure out that every single sort of thing that was a recreational item was scooped up, whether it's motorcycles, cars, boats, you have it. So all those people that have sunk money into that are probably starting to feel the pinch now that they've got a mortgage that's a higher interest rate, or they see the writings on the wall that I'm going to have to move into this higher rate realm. So what does that mean? Well, if we can do it and it's a mortgage that's had a fairly, half decent term, we can probably consolidate that debt into their existing mortgage and do a refinance. Or, like I say, 6 months out, we review their entire situation and we would determine if it makes sense to stay where they are, move, what have you, and then discuss credit conversations then. Because credit, it's like, that's like going to the dentist. Basically, nobody wants to hear that their credit's bad and why it's bad and, all that sort of stuff. So, because those really are the essentials: is ability to repay, your capacity, obviously, to pay, and your credit. So as long as your credit worthiness is there, then, we can accommodate you. But if there is an issue, then I would rather, know about it as early as possible so we can rectify it, because it does take time in some cases to rectify credit issues, right? So, sorry, going off on a
no, 100, it's all valuable information. So if there are credit issues coming up, how long does that this is a really nuanced question, I understand. But any rule of thumb, like this is roughly how long it'll take to fix a credit issue?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've been fortunate at Pill Rock. We've had some really good guys come in from Equifax to give us some very enlightening, seminars on how credit works and how the scoring works. And this was even things that I wasn't fully aware of when I was at RBC necessarily. And what that kind of does is it helps us to say, yeah, listen, we need to, before we do this, and this for your own purchase or your refinance or what have you, we need to take care of this, because we know we have to pull credit, but you have this blemish on your bureau that we need to answer. And the good thing is 9 times out of 10, it's small stuff. Like usually it's stupid things like, cell phone accounts, or $500 Capital One credit cards, stuff that people would get when they were in college, university, and they took it for granted and maybe just cast it aside. But before you know it, there's a $300 collection item because you thought you closed it, but there was, an additional item to post or what have you, and you're left with this item that you have to fix. So those ones are ones that you can speak to and fix, and they're not necessarily big. But if the client is going through a different scenario whereby they can't make mortgage payments and stuff like that, that issue in and of itself is a little bit different. So time to resolve smaller accounts It usually can be resolved fairly quickly as long as you get the dialogue open with TransUnion or Equifax so that you can, tell your case. The client makes their payment, they provide their proof, and then Equifax goes in, fixes it on their end, and it usually takes the bureaus 30 to 60 days to kind of rectify the situation on the reporting side, sometimes faster depending on how quickly it can get pushed through. But the other side of the coin on the much, much heavier credit bureau stuff, those are things that would, for a client that is like, say, for example, bankruptcies or consumer proposals, those will take years to rectify. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a client can't get a mortgage. It just means we would have to negotiate different terms with likely an alternative lender to help get them back on their feet. So yeah, I mean, it's not instantaneous when we try to fix credit, but we can usually turn it around fairly quickly.
Oh, so I mean, that's something I didn't. First time I'm kind of listening to that, where the credit, at least the small stuff that you're saying, or the relatively small stuff, like the phone bill that you're talking about, if you pay it off, you can actually communicate directly with the credit bureaus to actually rectify it. Because I always thought you had to pay it off, and then the collection agency or whoever it is says, well, this is paid off, and then it magically disappears from your credit report. But you're saying that I can pay it off, provide proof, and to some extent, obviously this is not across the board, but be able to kind of communicate directly with the credit bureaus to kind of clean up my credit report.
Yeah, so how it would essentially start is we identify the problem first. So we identify what the situation is and what it is that needs to be rectified, because it does happen quite often where the client doesn't necessarily know. I've had numerous clients where they didn't realize that a card was in collections or something like that. And usually sometimes it's a balance as small as a couple of $100, but it's still enough for a collection item to hinder your credit score, and also be chased by a collection company. So when we identify it, typically what we do is we as a broker, and not every broker does this, but because I've dealt with it before, usually what we do is we reach out to the credit bureau and just say, look, we've got an item we need to fix. For privacy reasons, the bureau can't necessarily work directly with the broker. They have to work directly with the client. But at least what we can do is set them on the right path so that they can, have the tools to fix it. Because most often, or than not, clients themselves want to fix the situation because they weren't aware of it. And of course, it always pisses people off when they find out that their credit score has been hurt because of whatever reason. So yeah, that open dialogue helps us to get those remedied faster and get the client back on track. And then once the credit bureau is, that item is resolved, it doesn't necessarily come off your credit bureau, but it shows as resolved. And then every time going forward, it kind of sucks because you have to speak to it. But I always tell clients that have had a collection item, keep whatever receipts you have when you paid it off, have those handy, saved in a file, whatever. So that way, anytime you apply for credit, you're going to get asked by an adjudicator at some point, hey, what's this derogatory on your credit bureau? Yes, we can speak to that. Here's my proof that I've paid it off and it's been resolved. And the credit bureau will show that it's been paid and resolved. But you're always going to get that question. So the key is to just have those answers before they ask them, and it makes for a much, much smoother transition for them. So
no, I mean, that's great advice. But so stepping back a little bit, I just wanted to kind of revisit the whole idea of, there's a lot, like, to what you were saying, there's a lot of individuals over COVID, Canadians who got the motorcycles, who've got because credit was very cheap. It was 0%. They were giving you everything to come and just buy, and it was tempting, and people did purchase and enjoy themselves over COVID.
If you had time.
Yeah.
Right? You had more than enough time to go to the cottage. Hey, you know what? So we got 12 months off. Let's buy a new boat and go to the cottage.
So,
who cares?
So for those those individuals who are now all about the boating life and they've got to consolidate debt, I feel like part of me is saying that there's going to be people who are going to be going to their bank and no longer can qualify at that bank. And I feel like there may be a significant amount of individuals who are doing that because either they're consolidating debt or they're going back and they're seeing that, you know what, like the payments are too high and I have to move to maybe an alternative lender because I have to pay something down so that my ratios line up and I don't have that money lying around. What would you say? I mean, this is another crystal ball question, but I mean, I'm sure my listeners have the same questions. How often do you think you're going to see Canadians doing that? Like, is that something that's a slim chance? Is there enough that you would say that everybody should be kind of looking at their finances right now? Or is it just like, you know what, there's enough that again, everybody should be kind of opening up their accounts and looking at like where they are? Because I know that there's significant people in negative equity. Negative equity, for those listeners who don't know, it's more you're not even paying off the interest on your mortgage, and
Correct.
Your mortgage is actually getting bigger at the end of your term because there's some big banks who kept your variable rate payment the same, and now the interest doesn't cover that. So I'm assuming those guys, when they're coming back, they're gonna have to pay something. So my question is how big of a issue do you think this is going to be for Canadians? Do you think it's going to be a lot? Is it going to be not a lot? What's your perspective on all of that?
Terrific question. And yeah, this is a wonderful crystal ball question because this is what they're bracing for the next 12 to 24 months. You know, we've got however many $1 billion that are going to be renewed over the next few years. But to answer your question, I've been doing that for over a decade in terms of, hey, Jake, you know, listen, I've got house X in such and such, and you know, I've just put my son through university, and we used our line of credit. Now I want to consolidate all that debt. Oh, and by the way, you know, we did buy that 23-foot glass, Tron, and I really don't like the interest rate. So can we maybe, you know, bundle those together? And absolutely, those again go back to, you know, 6 months out from your renewal. Let's look at those options and see what it looks like, because, you know, a lot of people, when they, especially now, I would say we want to look at it because we've gone from such a, you know, back 10 years ago, we were looking at all the 299 rates, right? Like everybody was getting a 299 rate, and it was easy to consolidate and refinance. So that wasn't an issue, and banks weren't necessarily, you know, too concerned as long as the ratios worked and they had the capacity to pay. They were fine approving them for that sort of stuff. But now we've got a push from the government. You know, they're stating, and I get it, we can't live in debt for our entire lives. They're like, we really need to reduce household debt. So how do we do that? Well, we live in a consumer-driven growth economy. That's very, very hard. But if you can whittle away at it, you could take those items, look at the equity of the house, because that's the other thing that's gone on is house values have increased dramatically over the last, you know, 7 to 8 years. There is capacity there in terms of equity to do it. Whether or not the clients have the capacity to pay, that now becomes a question where, okay, now we have to get creative. And the scenario you're kind of talking about, like, it's almost a worst case scenario, because then it means someone may have to downsize or give up the home or what have you, as an absolute worst case scenario. But that's only if they really got into a situation where, you know, they had accumulated too much debt because at the time they could afford to, because rates were low, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, it's something that is a workable option, but something that clients need to consider early so that they're prepared for whatever changes might come, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm asking a lot of tough questions, and I just, while you were saying that, I had another question, and it's to what you were talking about earlier. Again, so you've got an environment where there's a lot of consumers with a lot of debt, but they do have equity that they can't tap into. Now, there's a lot of, I would say, optimistic individuals who think that You know what? They're just gonna drop the rates next year because Canadians can't afford to renew and all of this other stuff. But you're saying that it's gonna take us 4 to 5 years to kind of get out of it. Now, I think that yeah, I'm not a finance guy, so I can't really make a prediction on this. But even if, let's say, we're getting out of this in 4 to 5 years, that's where the rate drops is, and that's like the normal. What is the normal to you? What's that picture? It's not going to go down to 1%, 0.99 on some of these mortgages that we saw.
Yeah.
What's that normal that we're going to in 4 to 5 years?
Yeah, and that's a really, so the hardest question that I get asked from clients is this: Jake, when are these rates going to drop? And nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah.
I think the speculation is, and one of the best ways to kind of gauge it is the way the rate system works with banks is kind of a litmus test, meaning that if the bank is going to hedge their bets on a 5-year term and lower the rates on a 5-year term, that kind of means and speaks to us that maybe rates are going to start to get reduced in that 5-year term. But economies being equal and the way things fluctuate nowadays, it may not necessarily be 5 years. So they're looking at a picture right now of what the economy is doing and how it's flowing. So they're going to look at, okay, well, if a client wants a 2-year term or a 3-year term, we're willing to offer them this, and it's higher. So to kind of answer your question, the new norm, what we've been kind of hearing from some economists is we could see sub 4% interest rates within the next 12 to 18 months if things go the way they're kind of planning it to, meaning that, the inflation starts to drop, bond yields start to change, all that sort of stuff. And then we start to see a calming and a cooling of the market. But the thing is, it got ramped up so quickly in that time frame, and that's prior to COVID and during COVID, you had house prices that were going through the roof. You had people buying things left, right, and center, and all that sort of stuff. So because it got ramped up so quickly, it's kind of like damage control. The Bank of Canada is trying to rein things in so that people aren't necessarily beyond extension, that they can't get out of it. And I think like I say, that 18 to 24 months is probably a realistic time frame for when we start to see real reduction in rates. But it could be 3 to 4 years or 5 years. It all just depends on how the economy grows over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of Canadians also have like PTSD from COVID and what's gone on because rates freaking went down, and then they went like overnight, and then overnight they went the other way. So people are just kind of still just spinning as to what's going to happen. And I think that moving forward to what you're saying, it's going to slow down. They have to slow it down because you can't run an economy where nobody understands what interest rates are going to be the next day. You need to have more of a kind of smoother transition to a high rate to a low rate environment and kind of working through it.
And the one thing too to remember is Canada. I mean, Canada is not out of the realm of being affected by this sort of stuff. Obviously, every nation's going to. But the one thing that's good about Canada is they're somewhat insulated from some of the factors that are affecting other nations right now. And what it equates to is, our inflation has gone to this, but some other nations' inflation has gone 5 or 6 times more than where we're at. So, the way our institutions work, are they perfect? No. But are they strong and are they sensible? Absolutely they are. I mean, in a lot of respects, the one thing that a lot of the brokerage world complains about, we all have the same complaints. Well, you have this stress test and I'm trying to work on putting someone into a 6% mortgage and their stress test is at 8%. Like, we got to do something here. Can we change the amortization back to 30 or 35 years or eliminate the stress test or like there's all kinds of speculation out there as to what we should or shouldn't do. But that's kind of where we're at. It's if it was a policy change 10 years ago to protect clients from the crash, well, this is a completely different circumstance altogether. Now we're hitting clients with a stress test, reduced amortization, this, and this. at some point they're going to have to give serious consideration to altering some of those policies in order to ease the market a little bit. Whether or not that happens this year, next year, or the year after, I don't know. But it's definitely being something that's been tossed around in the pot kind of thing.
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree with you more. I do believe that, for lack of better words, the Canadian handlers of the economy, whether it's the Bank of Canada or our institutions, I feel like are some of the more sensible ones from around the world, and they don't cave into pressure, which is what I appreciate too. It saved us from like the 2008 crisis. I think, to what you're saying, things could have been a lot worse than they are, as they are in a lot of the rest of the world, and we've been insulated from a lot of it, and 100%. And you know what? That's a great note to end this podcast. I really appreciate you coming on. Before we sign off, I just want one thing. For all the listeners who want to reach out to you, who want to work with you, what's the best way of doing it? Do they email you, call you? What's kind of the process to get in touch with you and to work with you?
Yeah, email or call is absolutely the best way to reach out. We're open to conversations, early, because the last thing I want to have happen is have a client get their hopes up on something only to be disappointed at the last minute because something didn't work out. Email, telephone call. Let's get started and hopefully make the dream happen for the client.
Awesome. For those who are listening, Jacob's information is, again, either on the side or below, depending on where you're listening. Definitely reach out to him. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Harris, and we'll do this again soon, hopefully.
Hopefully. Take care.
Take care.